20 years ago, a police officer made a decision that changed not only his life, but also the lives of 6 little girls. These girls were rejected by the system. No one wanted to adopt them because of the color of their skin. But he, without hesitation, opened his heart and home to them, becoming a real father to them. And the way they repaid him years later is truly amazing. Hello, friends. Before we continue this incredible story, let's chat a little. Write in the comments where you are watching us from. It will be interesting to know the geography of our community. The officer, John Harrison, had always believed in the power of kindness and support, but he never imagined that his decision to take in 6 girls would change their lives so profoundly. The girls, rejected by dozens of families, seemed doomed to a life in the system. They had seen other children from their shelter taken into families, but each time they heard the same thing: "We're looking for someone else." For many potential parents, the girls' skin color was a barrier, but for John, it didn't matter. He didn't see unwanted children in front of him. He saw 6 little girls who desperately needed love, care, and a chance at a better future. One day, he walked into the shelter and took all 6 of them. No one could understand why he did it, because being a foster parent is a huge responsibility, and 6 children are a challenge. But John was sure he was doing the right thing. The first time was not easy. The girls came to their new family with different fears, pain and mistrust. Their life before meeting John was full of disappointments, and now they had to learn to trust again. But John did not give up. He was patient, caring, and understood that the girls needed time to get used to their new life. Every night he read them fairy tales, told them stories from his life as a police officer, and always reminded them that they were important and loved. Over time, a real sense of family developed between them. The girls began not only to learn from John, but also to help each other, becoming support in difficult times. Each of them grew, gaining confidence and strength. John taught them to believe in themselves, fight for their dreams, and never give up, despite the obstacles. The years passed. The girls grew up, graduated from school, and began to build their careers. Some became doctors, others teachers and lawyers. Each of them achieved great success in life, but did not forget who was with them every step of the way. And although John never expected gratitude, what happened 20 years later was a complete surprise to him. One day, when John retired, he was invited to a gala dinner supposedly held in honor of his service in the police. He went, thinking it was just a regular event to celebrate the end of his career. However, when he entered the room, he was greeted by 6 smiling faces, his girls. They had organized the evening especially for him, to thank him for everything he had done for them. But it wasn't just any dinner. Each of the girls told their story, about how John had changed their lives, how his love and care had helped them become who they were. At the end of the evening, they presented John with a gift, the keys to the house. It turned out that all these years they had been saving money to buy him the dream house he had always talked about but never dared to spend money on. It was their way of saying thank you to the man who had become a real father figure and role model for them. John was shocked. He sat there, barely holding back tears, realizing that his love and care had truly changed someone's life. In that moment, he realized that his decision to adopt these 6 girls 20 years ago was not just the right one, it was the most important thing he had ever done. John looked at his daughters sitting next to him at the table and couldn't believe how they had grown, how strong, successful, and independent women they had become. Each of them, once lost and forgotten by society, was now the embodiment of what it meant to overcome difficulties and move forward. Despite everything, he was proud of them as only a father could be. The house they gave him wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of their gratitude, an acknowledgement that his sacrifices, love, and devotion had not been in vain. But for John, the greatest gift was seeing them happy and successful. Every story they told around the table took him back in time, reminding him of how they had been through the toughest of times together. The oldest of the girls, Lauren, told of how as a child she was close to going down the slippery path of crime, lost and without hope. She saw no point in fighting for a better life. But John noticed her inner torment in time and became the one who extended a helping hand. He sat with her in the kitchen at night, helping her cope with anger, pain, and loneliness. He taught her self-control, And that true strength is not revenge or aggression, but the ability to forgive and find a better way. Now Lauren was a successful lawyer, defending the rights of children and teenagers who found themselves in difficult life situations, as she once was. Maria, the second eldest, said she had always been afraid of not being accepted because of her appearance. She faced racism and discrimination at school, and her self-esteem was at zero, but John helped her believe in herself. He constantly told her that the color of her skin was her strength, her uniqueness, not a flaw. With his support, Maria went on to study to become a doctor and now helped hundreds of people, providing medical care in disadvantaged areas. Anna, Kelly, Samantha, and Jenny each shared how John had impacted their lives. Anna became a teacher, trying to raise children so they wouldn't feel isolated or rejected. Kelly, who was afraid to trust people as a child, became a psychologist, helping others overcome emotional trauma. Samantha found her calling in art, creating paintings that captured the beauty and struggles of her life. And Jenny, the youngest, followed in John's footsteps and became a police officer, so she could protect and support others. As the evening drew to a close, John realized that his life had meaning not only because of his service in the police, but above all because of these 6 wonderful girls. He remembered all the difficult moments, the sleepless nights and the doubts that had tormented him over the years. But now, looking at his daughters, he knew every moment was worth it. The girls hugged him goodbye, promising to visit him in his new home as often as possible. They laughed, remembering funny stories from the past. When they were little, John felt like the happiest man in the world. He realized that his love and efforts had not only changed their lives, they had changed him too. Now that they had become successful women, he knew that they would fly all over the world, but they would always be a part of his heart and his family. This wasn't just a story about a man taking 6 girls into his home. This was a story about how one family overcame all the difficulties, managed to stay strong, and found happiness. And the way the girls thanked their adoptive father 20 years later was proof that true love and kindness always come back, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. Several months had passed since the evening when the girls presented John with the gift of his dream home. Life was going smoothly, and it seemed that everything had finally fallen into place. John was enjoying his well-deserved rest and the fact that his daughters had achieved success. But one day, clouds appeared in his life again. One evening, as John sat by the fireplace in his new home, Maria called him. Her voice was excited, almost trembling. She told him that Lauren was having serious problems at work. One of her high-profile cases, where she defended a minor from a corruption scandal involving influential people, had attracted the attention of dangerous people. Lauren began receiving threats, and her life was in danger. Despite her firmness and confidence, she was in desperate straits. John immediately felt a sense of unease. He had grown accustomed to facing danger in his years on the force, but the thought of one of his girls being in real danger scared him more than anything he had ever experienced before. He knew he had to act fast. Despite his age and fatigue, John felt that same adrenaline rush that had once driven him on the job. He contacted Lauren and went to see her without delay. When they met, Lauren, despite her attempts to appear strong, looked exhausted and scared. She told her father that unknown people had been following her, and that her car had recently been attacked by unknown people. A storm raged inside her. She did not want to back down from the case, knowing that she was protecting an innocent child, but she realized that very dangerous people were playing against her. John realized that this was serious and decided to contact his former colleagues in the police to arrange protection for Lauren. But the next day, when he went to meet her, something terrible happened. Her car was blown up in the parking lot near her office. Luckily, Lauren was not inside, but it was a clear signal. The threat was real, and it was getting closer. This incident was the point of no return. John knew that if he did not take drastic measures, the consequences could be catastrophic. He gathered all his daughters in his house, warning that not only Lauren, but they too could now be in danger. It was a difficult decision, but he insisted that they move in with him for a while until the situation was resolved. The girls didn't agree right away. Each of them had already become accustomed to her independence, but deep down they knew that their father was right. The family was united under one roof again, as it had been many years ago. but now there was a threat in the air. John again felt the responsibility that had been on his shoulders all those years ago, when he first took them under his wing. He spent most of his nights sleeping, turning over his plan of action in his head. He contacted private detectives, consulted extensively with former police colleagues, trying to find clues about who was behind these threats. He felt like they were walking on thin ice every day. One evening, when the whole family was sitting at dinner, the doorbell suddenly rang. John became wary. He was not expecting guests, and in the current situation, any unexpected event could be dangerous. He motioned for the girls to remain where they were and, quietly taking his old police revolver from the wall, approached the door. Opening it, he saw a man standing in the doorway, in the shadows, his face barely visible. The stranger looked at John, and before he could say anything, he whispered, "You don't know who you're dealing with. Stay away if you want your girls to live." This was the last warning. The man on the threshold disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving John speechless. The words sounded like a cold sentence. The threat was real, and the danger was approaching his family faster and faster. John gripped the handle of the revolver tightly, feeling a wave of anger and anxiety roll through his body. He knew that such warnings were not empty words, and if they were not acted upon, the consequences could be tragic. Back in the house, John tried to remain calm, but the girls immediately noticed the tension on his face. Lauren, as the oldest, approached him first. "Dad, what happened?" Her voice was full of concern. He couldn't hide the truth from them. Leading everyone to the table, John told them about the visit of the mysterious stranger. The reaction was immediate. Lauren clenched her fists, her face expressing a mixture of fear and determination, and Maria, usually reserved, was already dialing her colleagues on the phone to discuss how to protect the family. Jenny, the youngest and most emotional, was barely holding back tears. "We can't just sit back and wait for them to attack us." Lauren looked at John firmly. "I'm not going to give up on this, but we have to prepare. We have to strike first." John knew they had to act, and fast. He contacted one of his old friends, Bill, who was now working as a private investigator, and asked him to help figure out who was behind the threats. Together, they began gathering information, building a chain of events that could lead them to who ordered the attacks. Meanwhile, the girls beefed up their home security. Lauren insisted that each of them be prepared for any situation. They installed cameras, alarms, and agreed not to leave the house alone. John couldn't help but admire how his daughters, despite their fear, didn't give up and continued to fight. He saw in them the very strength he had been trying to instill in them since childhood. Several days passed waiting for news from Bill. Finally, late in the evening, the long-awaited call came. Bill, his friend, was able to find out the key information. Behind the threats was a powerful criminal group connected to the politicians Lauren exposed in her case. These people would stop at nothing to protect their interests. Realizing who they were dealing with, John realized that his skills and connections in the police would no longer help. The enemy was too powerful, but they were not going to retreat. John, gathering his daughters, said, "I always taught you to fight for justice. We will not let these people break us, but now we must be smarter than them. We will make them make mistakes." Their plan was simple, but risky. Lauren agreed to pretend to back down and close the case, while John, Bill, and a few trusted colleagues set a trap. They would call the criminals to an open meeting to gather irrefutable evidence and hand it over to federal authorities. Lauren sent out an official statement saying she was leaving the case, allegedly under pressure. This news immediately caused a wave of discussions in the media. The criminals might have thought they had achieved their goal, but in fact, this was only the beginning. A few days later, Lauren received an invitation to a peace meeting from the group. They wanted to make a deal with her to finally close the matter. John insisted on going with her. It was dangerous, but he was not going to leave his daughter alone in such a situation. On the night of the meeting, John, Lauren, and Bill arrived at the designated location, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. It looked like a typical place for such things to happen. Silence, broken only by the distant hum of traffic, hung in the air as they walked inside. Several men in formal suits were already waiting for them. The negotiations began calmly, but tension was in the air. One of the men offered Lauren a large sum of money and promised protection if she forgot about her investigation. But she, already realizing that these were empty promises, continued to stall for time while John and Bill collected evidence. Hidden cameras and microphones recorded everything that happened. But the situation changed dramatically when one of the men suddenly recognized Bill, the former detective. Everyone immediately realized that it was a trap. Chaos ensued as men reached for their guns. John immediately threw himself at Lauren, trying to shield her from the gunfire. The warehouse filled with the roar of gunfire and screams. At that moment, the police arrived, a group that John had arranged in advance. Knowing that something like this could happen, a shootout ensued, but thanks to the prompt reaction of John and Bill, everything ended quickly. The criminals were detained, and all the evidence collected was handed over to the authorities. A few weeks later, the case was closed. The criminals who had threatened Lauren and her family were behind bars. John felt relief again, but also realized how fragile life can be, even years after his service. Now, back in his quiet life, he realized that his family had gone through another test, but had only become stronger. The shadows of danger had retreated, leaving behind a clear sky. John could once again be proud of his daughters, who never gave up, even in the face of the most terrible threat. After the events that had put John and his daughters' lives at risk, the house had returned to its usual silence, but this silence was different, filled with the knowledge of how fragile safety is and how precious every minute spent together is. The family had experienced something that had left an indelible mark on the hearts of all who were involved. John, despite his strength and endurance, felt a deep weariness. These months had reminded him that the years pass, and that even the strongest warriors eventually tire. After the criminals were put behind bars, Lauren and her sisters tried to return to normal life, but an even greater sense of unity arose between them. Previously, they were bound by shared memories of childhood spent together under John's protection, but now it was something deeper. They were saved by the fact that they had always been a team, supporting each other even in the most difficult moments. One evening, when the whole family was gathered for dinner, the silence was broken by Jenny, the youngest. "Dad, I've been wanting to tell you for a long time." She sighed and looked at her sisters, as if seeking support from them. "You saved us when we were little, and then you did it again. I keep thinking about how our lives would have turned out if you hadn't taken us, and then, I just don't know how to express my gratitude." John looked closely at his youngest daughter, and as always, a warm smile appeared on his face. "You don't owe me anything, Jenny. You and your sisters have made my life complete. You've given me everything I could ever want. Being your father is the best gift I've ever received." But this time, Jenny couldn't hold back her tears. Her voice trembled as she continued. "No, Dad, I know you feel this, but I want to give you something in return. Not just to you, but to myself. We are all here because of you. We were scattered, broken children, and you turned us into a family. I feel like I have to be worthy of the love you gave us." Jenny's words, though spoken with a shudder, echoed in the hearts of each of the sisters. They had all felt something similar, but had never dared to express it so directly. After all these years, they finally realized that John had not only given them shelter and protection, he had given them a future. Maria, usually reserved and calm, was the first to decide to support her younger sister. "Jenny is right. We have been building our lives for so many years, working, achieving success, but sometimes I catch myself thinking that I still live by your lessons, Dad. In any difficult situation, I remember what you would do, how you would support us." Lauren, sitting next to Maria, added quietly, "You taught us that true strength is not fighting for revenge or fear, but for justice. You gave me not only a family, but also a meaning. Everything I do in life is an attempt to be at least a little bit like you." John listened to his daughters in silence, feeling tears welling up in his eyes. He was a strong man who had been through many trials, but at that moment he felt genuine gratitude for the fact that these girls he had saved long ago had changed and grown so much. They had become not only successful women, but also those who lived with love and kindness in their hearts. "You have no idea how proud I am of each and every one of you," John finally said, his voice barely audible with emotion. "When I adopted you, I just wanted you to be happy and safe, but what you've done with your lives, It's more than I could have ever dreamed of. You've given me more than I've ever given you. You're my pride." His words hung in the air, filled with silence and understanding. There was no need to say much at that moment. It was clear they were bound not only by blood, but by years of love, care, and shared trials. John knew that he no longer had to care for his daughters the way he had before. Now they could protect him, as he had once protected them. But despite this, one feeling grew in John's heart, the feeling of time. The years took their toll, and he increasingly felt that his strength was running out. One morning, when he woke up, it seemed to him that his heart was heavy, as if something was pulling it down. Doctors told him about high blood pressure, that it was time to rest more. But he could not stop. His family was his everything, and he wanted to see his daughters continue to grow and achieve success. But one day, John left the house and felt a sharp pain in his chest. He leaned on the porch railing, trying to collect his thoughts, but his strength was leaving him. It was a heart attack. At that moment, it seemed to him that his life was flashing before his eyes like a film strip. Those moments when he first met his girls, their first steps into a new life, their victories and failures, moments of pride and anxiety, all of this was a part of him. But before his consciousness faded, he saw one of his daughters, Kelly, run out into the street. She immediately realized what had happened and immediately called an ambulance. Within minutes, paramedics had taken John to the hospital, where his life was once again hanging by a thread. All 6 daughters gathered in a room where their father was fighting for his life. Each of them sat by his bed, holding his hand as he had once held theirs. In that moment, they realized that their lives were hanging in the balance again, only now, at stake was the man they loved most. It was several long hours before the doctors told them that John had survived the surgery and would now recover. It was a miracle, and when John finally opened his eyes, the first thing he saw were the faces of his daughters, the faces of those for whom he had once risked everything. They looked at him with such love and gratitude that John knew he had done everything right in his life. They were his legacy, and no matter what happened next, his love and lessons would stay with them forever. "We're here, Dad," Lauren said softly, putting her arm around his shoulder, "and we'll always be with you, just like you've been with us all these years." The few words they said to each other in the hospital room said more than 1,000 words. After John opened his eyes and saw his daughters, his heart was filled with warmth. He was still weak, but he knew that despite his age and all the trials, he was still surrounded by those who loved him most in the world. That was the most important thing to him. John spent the first few days after the operation in the hospital. His daughters took turns keeping watch, always nearby. Lauren brought him fresh newspapers and books. Maria brought him home-cooked meals, and Jenny helped him with the physical exercises the doctor had prescribed. Each of them tried to be as helpful as he had once been to them. After some time, John began to slowly recover, and doctors informed him that he would need long-term rehabilitation. This news worried his daughters. They were afraid that he might not survive the long recovery process. However, John was determined to fight. He knew that for their sake, he was ready to do everything possible to get back on his feet. But while he was in the hospital, he had time to think. He often thought back to the years when he first met each of the girls. They were small, scared, full of pain and doubt. He remembered how they slowly opened up to him, learned to trust, how they walked with him through life's trials. These were difficult, but incredibly important years for all of them. One evening, as the sun was setting, Lauren walked into the room. She sat next to her father's bed, and for a while they just sat in silence. Then Lauren suddenly spoke. "Dad." Her voice was quiet but firm. "I want to tell you something. All these years, all these cases and battles for the truth, they were my way of expressing gratitude for what you did for us. But I was always afraid that one day I might not have time to say the most important thing. I just wanted you to know, I always aspired to be as strong as you. You were an example to me of what it means to be not just a father, but a real person. You taught me to fight for those I love and for justice. I don't know if I could have become who I am without you." John looked at his eldest daughter and his eyes filled with tears. He knew she wasn't used to sharing her feelings, and hearing her say those words meant nothing to him. He quietly took her hand. "You've always been strong, Lauren," he said, smiling. "Even when you were little, you just didn't know it yet. and I knew you had the strength to lead you down the right path. You've become more than I could have ever imagined, and I'm proud of you every day." Lauren smiled slightly, and at that moment the other sisters entered the room. They all brought small gifts for John: books, cards, photos of their trips together, childhood drawings that once hung on the walls of the house. Each of the daughters wanted to express their love and support, understanding how much this man meant to them. Time passed, and John gradually began to feel better. When he was discharged from the hospital, he was met with a joyful surprise. His daughters arranged his home so that he could recover peacefully. They did everything for his comfort, taking care of every little thing. But for John, something else was more important. They were close, together, and this gave him the strength to move on. One morning, as John sat in the garden enjoying the fresh air, Kelly approached him. She was carrying a small box in her hands. "Dad," she said, sitting down next to him, "the girls and I thought you should see something. It's as part of our thanks for everything you've done." She handed him the box. John, slightly surprised, opened it and saw an old album, which contained photographs and letters. Each page was filled with memories from the first days when they became his daughters, to the present moment. On each page were their thoughts, emotions, childhood drawings, photos from school, college, first works. John carefully turned the pages, feeling how with each photo something warm and joyful came to life in his soul. One of the letters caught his attention. It was from Jenny, and had been written when she was a child, just beginning to learn to write. In it, she thanked him in simple but sincere words for always being there, even when she was scared or having a hard time. As John read the letter, his eyes filled with tears. He felt the depth of the love his girls had always felt for him. All this time he thought he had saved them, but in that moment he realized that they had saved him no less. John closed the album and looked at Kelly. "This is the most precious thing I have ever received," he said quietly. "Thank you all." Kelly smiled, her eyes on the verge of tears too. "It's us who should thank you, Dad. We'll always be there for you. You taught us that family is the most important thing." Months passed, and John slowly but surely regained his strength. But each day spent with his daughters was a new reminder of how precious these moments were. They were now all together more often, spending more time talking, walking, and having family dinners. And even though John knew his health would never be the same again, he was happy. He lived with a sense of accomplishment, knowing that his life had been full of love and meaning. He hadn't just raised 6 girls, he had created a family that would become his greatest legacy. Several months had passed since John had returned home from his surgery. His health was improving, but there were still moments when he felt weak and vulnerable. Although his daughters did everything they could to help him rest and recuperate, John began to notice the worry in their eyes. Every time he slowly rose from his chair or took a deep breath, they watched him with concern, as if they feared that this might be his last day. One such morning, John felt a strange heaviness in his soul. A light autumn rain was falling outside, and the air was cold and damp. He was standing by the window, watching the falling drops, when Lauren came into the room. "Dad, how are you?" she asked cautiously, noticing his tired appearance. John nodded, but didn't have time to answer. At that moment, his heart suddenly began to beat faster, as if something inside was pressing on his chest. He felt the blood pounding in his temples. His hands were shaking. He knew that this could be another sign of trouble, but he didn't want to scare Lauren. He took a deep breath and tried to smile, but Lauren could already see that something was wrong. "Daddy, are you okay?" Her voice became more insistent. She quickly walked up to him and took his hand. John was silent. He didn't want to admit that something had gone wrong again, but his body was no longer obeying him. "Lauren," he said with difficulty, "I think we need to call the doctor again." A few minutes later, the house was filled with the sound of sirens. Jenny and Maria arrived in an ambulance before it had even been parked. They watched as medics carried their father on a stretcher, hooked up to machines. Tears rolled down Jenny's face, but she held herself tightly, trying not to show her emotions, because her father had always taught her to be strong. But something had changed. This time was different. John's heart couldn't take it anymore. It was as if his body refused to obey his will. The doctors quickly admitted him to intensive care, but despite their best efforts, the situation was grim. All 6 daughters were gathered in the room. Their faces were pale. Their eyes were filled with fear and pain. Each of them knew what was happening, but none of them could allow themselves to think about it out loud. Lauren, usually reserved and collected, bit her lips nervously. Maria hugged Jenny to somehow comfort her. Soon a doctor approached them. He looked worried. "Your father's condition is unstable. He is in critical condition. We have done everything possible, but his heart is too weak." He fell silent, giving his daughters time to process what he had heard. "The main thing now is that he feels your support. We can only observe his condition." The words hit her like a blow. Lauren closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and sat down on a chair by the door. Everything inside her was boiling anger at the world, at the disease, at fate. As a man who had dedicated his life to protecting others, her father was now so vulnerable, and there was nothing she could do about it. Hours passed. John lay under machines, his breathing weak, but he was conscious. He felt something had changed. It was more than just the illness. He knew his time was running out, but the most important thing to him was that his daughters were there. He saw them in the shadows of the room, felt their presence, and knew that they were his greatest achievement in life. As they all entered the room, John opened his eyes. Lauren, who had a hard time starting a conversation, nevertheless approached first. "Dad, we're here." Her voice trembled. "We're all here. You're not alone. Do you hear?" John smiled weakly, his hand reaching out to Lauren, weak and heavy. "I always knew you could do it," he whispered softly. "You've become so strong. I'm proud of each and every one of you." Tears began to stream down Lauren's cheeks. She sat closer, her fingers touching her father's hand. The other daughters stood nearby, and this time none of them could hold back their tears. Their father had always been their fortress, but now that fortress was slowly fading from their lives. "Daddy," Maria said quietly, her voice full of pain, "we love you. You've always been our light. You've given us so much. We just don't know how to live without you." John was silent. It was hard for him to speak, but he squeezed her hand, trying to convey everything he couldn't put into words. He knew his daughters were strong enough to go on, but seeing them cry was unbearable. As his breathing became more and more uneven, John remembered everything. The first day he brought the girls home, how they cried at night, how he taught them to catch a ball, consoled them after school fights, how he worried about their future. All these moments passed before his eyes like a film strip. He was proud of his life, of having managed to raise such women, so strong and independent. "I will always be with you," John whispered quietly, closing his eyes, "always." His breathing gradually subsided. The room was filled with quiet crying. His heart stopped beating. The loss was hard on everyone, but it was at that moment that the sisters realized how deep the roots of their love for each other were, and how much their father had brought them together. John was gone, but his legacy was not only in raising them, but in the fact that they became a true family, despite all the difficulties they overcame together. After the funeral, life gradually began to return to normal, but his absence was felt everywhere. The sisters tried to be together as often as possible, because that was how they felt that their father was still with them. They continued his work to help others, to be fair and kind, as he taught. Several years passed, and each of them built their own lives. Lauren continued to fight for truth and justice. Maria opened a charity for children who needed help. Jenny became a doctor to save lives, as their father was once saved. And even though John was no longer with them, they felt his presence in every decision, every success, and every moment of their lives. His lessons, his love, and his devotion remained with them forever. It had been several years since John left this world. Each of his daughters had found their own path in life, and though they continued to move forward, his memory lived on in their hearts. Lauren continued her career in human rights as planned. She was a well-known lawyer, fighting for the rights of those who could not defend themselves. Her work often involved high-profile cases and public speaking, but everything she did was aimed at helping those in need and supporting justice. Inside, Lauren felt that her father was proud of her, and this gave her strength in difficult times. Maria, who runs the charity she dreamed of, has been incredibly successful in her endeavor. She has seen her foundation help thousands of children, providing them with education, medical care, and a chance at a better future. Often, when meeting those she helped, Maria felt like her father was with her, and this gave her motivation and confidence in her important mission. Jenny, who became a doctor, continued to help people, inspired by the way her father had once supported them. She worked in a large hospital and often dealt with difficult cases, where her professionalism and ability to cope with difficulties were worth their weight in gold. Jenny could not help but think about how her father had survived those difficult moments, and it motivated her every day. Kelly, the youngest of the sisters, chose a career in social work. She worked for a local community organization that helped young people and families in difficult situations. Kelly believed that her work was an extension of what her father had done for them, and she tried to do everything she could to support those in similar situations. Each of them used their skills and knowledge to create a better society, remembering what their father taught them. But in their personal lives, each of them faced difficulties, and their bond as a family remained a source of strength and support for them. One day, on the anniversary of John's death, they decided to get together to celebrate his memory. It was a special day for all of them because they could remember all the best moments and share stories of how his lessons and love continue to live in their hearts. They gathered in the house where they had once spent much time together. The doors were open, and the house was filled with laughter and conversation again. They had a cozy evening, beginning with a dinner prepared according to their father's favorite recipes. On the table were dishes that he had prepared for them, and although the food was not perfect, it was full of memories and love. After dinner, they decided to play an old board game that used to be their favorite. Everyone sat down at the table, and as they played, they began to remember how their father often organized family evenings. They remembered funny stories, funny moments, and difficult times that they overcame together. Gradually the conversation turned to more serious topics. Each of the sisters began to share their thoughts on how their lives had changed since John left. Lauren, looking at her family, said, "You know, I always thought about how we changed after Dad left us. He was always the one who held us together, who showed us what it meant to be a real family. And even when he was gone, I feel like he was still there, in every decision, in every success." Maria nodded. "Yes, and what we do is not only a continuation of his work, but also a tribute to his memory. We should be proud of how we have grown and how we use his lessons to make the world a better place." Jenny, always reserved, added, "I think Dad would be proud of us. He always believed in us, and his belief in us is what keeps us going. We continue his work not because he made us do it, but because that's what he taught us, to be compassionate, hardworking and resilient." Kelly, holding back tears, said, "We are who we are because of him, and I know that every time I see a smile on the face of someone I helped, I see a piece of them in me." As the evening drew to a close, they went out into the backyard, where the air was filled with the scent of fresh grass and flowers. They looked at the stars, as they had once done with their father, and remembered how he had taught them about the stars and the universe. Lauren looked at the stars and said, "I believe that he is somewhere here, looking at us, and if he is really somewhere here, then he is proud of us and loves us as much as we love him." Everyone agreed, and that night they felt a deep connection to the one who had once given them so much. John had been a part of their lives, and although he was no longer physically with them, his spirit and legacy lived on through their actions, their love, and their desire to make the world a better place. And in the end, they all knew that despite their loss, they were never alone. They were one family, and that bond was stronger than anything they could ever encounter in life. And in that bond, as in every victory and hardship, they continued to remember their father, who was the most important person in the world to them. As time went on, even as each of John's daughters moved on with their lives, they often returned to memories of their father. Their lives were full of meaning and accomplishment, but deep down, each of them felt that not everything was complete. One day, several years later, Lauren received an unexpected letter. There was no sender's address on the envelope, only her name. She opened the letter and found it was handwritten. It spoke of some secret that John had left behind and its possible consequences. The letter contained coordinates and cryptic directions to meet at an old abandoned house that she had once visited with her father as children. Lauren was puzzled, but her curiosity and sense of duty to her father's memory pushed her to action. She didn't tell her sisters right away, deciding to figure out the situation on her own first. Lauren went to the given coordinates. The old house, surrounded by thickets and abandoned areas, looked sad and abandoned, but something about this place was familiar, as if this place kept a special secret. Inside the house it was dusty and dark, and all the details reminded of old memories. The search did not take long. In one of the corners of the house, she found an old safe. It was covered in a thick layer of dust and looked like it had not been touched for ages. Lauren tried to open it, but the lock was complicated. To her surprise, the letter contained the keywords for opening the safe, which she remembered from her father's stories about riddles and secrets. Eventually, she managed to open the safe, and inside she found several old documents and letters. The documents contained records of business projects and investments that John had started but never told his daughters about. One document read, Project Hope. Lauren noted that the project involved large investments in educational and medical facilities, but as is often the case with such projects, much was left unfinished. Letters written by John explained that he always wanted to leave a legacy that would help change the lives of many people. In one letter, he described his dream of creating a foundation that would support children and families in difficult situations, using all of its resources to create opportunities and help those in need. But the most amazing thing was that John predicted that at some point his daughters would discover the secret, and his plan would only be complete when they all united to see it through to the end. He left them the keys to these projects so that they could use them to continue his work. Lauren, shocked by what she had learned, realized that her father had left them more than just an inheritance. He had left them with the opportunity to change the lives of thousands of people. With this realization, she returned home and gathered her sisters. When Lauren told them about the find, everyone was shocked, but also inspired. Together, they reviewed the documents and began planning how they could complete their father's project. It took a lot of work to get everything in order, financing and legal matters, finding partners and support. But each of them felt like it was their duty and their chance to continue what had begun so many years ago. They encountered difficulties during the project. There were financial problems, legal obstacles and organizational difficulties, but they always found the strength to move forward, remembering that this was their father's business, and his dream was too important to leave unfinished. The Hope Project began to take shape. They opened several educational institutions and medical clinics in the areas most in need. Every time they saw the project helping people, they felt that their father was with them, supporting them and guiding their actions. One day, at the opening of a new educational center they named in John's honor, each daughter gave a speech about how their father had changed their lives and how they, in turn, were trying to change the lives of others. They shared their experiences, their struggles, and their joys, and the ceremony became a symbol of how family and legacy can unite people to achieve great things. The Hope Project has become a meaningful part of their lives and their way of paying tribute to the father who has done so much for them. After all, it is not only a continuation of his work, but also an embodiment of his deepest values and hopes for the future. John was gone, but his legacy lived on as a shining beacon, illuminating the path for those who followed him. Each of his daughters felt his presence in their successes and in helping those who needed their support. It was their way of continuing his dreams and making the world a little better, as he always strived to do. And so, in John's memory, his daughters continued to carry his dream forward, knowing that its completion was the most important thing in their lives. As time went on, Project Hope continued to grow and evolve. The Johnson sisters felt closer than ever as they worked on this ambitious endeavor, and their bond with their father remained strong. Every success, every goal achieved, reminded them that their father was with them, even if he was no longer physically present. But life, as it often happens, brings new challenges and unexpected twists of fate. One of these twists was an unexpected visit to their office. There was a knock on the door, and a stranger in an expensive suit stood before them. He introduced himself as Gregory Stewart, a representative of a large investment company that had previously had no connection with the project. Gregory said his company was interested in investing in Project Hope, but on one condition: they had to agree to certain changes in the foundation's management and focus. His offer seemed tempting, promising a huge infusion of funds and resources that could greatly expand the project. However, The sisters were concerned that these changes could undermine their original goals and the principles laid out by their father. Lauren, Maria, Jenny and Kelly gathered to discuss the proposal. The tension in the room was palpable. Lauren, as always, was the most decisive and said, "We must be careful. Our father left us this project for a specific purpose. If we allow ourselves to lose control of his original concept, we may forget what he really wanted." Maria, who had always been analytical, suggested looking into the terms of the offer in detail and meeting with Gregory to find out exactly what they wanted to change. After several meetings and in-depth analysis, they discovered that Gregory and his company had ulterior motives. It turned out that they wanted to use the fund to advance their own commercial interests, which was contrary to the mission of the project. When the sisters refused the offer, Gregory became aggressive. He began publicly criticizing their organization, claiming that they were ineffective and incapable of managing large investments. This attracted media attention and became a major problem for the foundation. Financial difficulties and public pressure began to affect the work of the project. This difficult situation tested their strength. Each daughter felt that her own efforts and sacrifices related to the project could be in vain. They began to lose confidence in themselves and in the future of the foundation. However, in this crisis they found support in each other. One night, while sitting together at the table and discussing their problems, they remembered how their father always said that true strength and resilience are revealed in difficult times. These words were like a flash of light in a dark night. "We can't afford to give up," Lauren said. "Dad always said that true strength comes from standing firm no matter what. We have to find a way to get through this." Maria, Jenny, and Kelly agreed. They decided not only to fight the negativity, but also to continue their work without sacrificing their principles. They began actively attracting public attention to the true achievements of the foundation, providing real stories of people who received help thanks to the Hope Project. The sisters organized a series of events and public meetings to draw attention to the project's successes and impact on people's lives. They collaborated with other organizations and community leaders to restore their reputation and support the project. Gradually, thanks to the persistence and efforts of the sisters, public opinion began to change. People saw the real work of the foundation and its impact on society. They began to receive support from new partners and donors who appreciated their commitment and work. A year after the crisis began, the Hope Project had regained its footing and even expanded its influence. They opened new facilities and programs that helped thousands of people. Lauren, Maria, Jenny, and Kelly felt that they had not only overcome the difficulties, but were stronger than ever. And while Gregory and his company were no longer a threat, their actions had left a deep mark. But the sisters knew they had pulled through because of their unity, their belief in the project, and their father's legacy. John always said that true value is not in how much you have, but in how you use what you have to do good. Ultimately, Project Hope became not just John's legacy, but a symbol of the strength and resilience of the family that carried on his legacy. Each of his daughters, despite their own personal accomplishments and paths, always returned to the project to remember what they had done and continued to do for others. And though their father was long gone, his lessons, his dreams, and his love lived on in each of them. In each project, and in each life-changing person, his legacy was everlasting, and his spirit continued to inspire them to new heights and feats. Several more years passed, and Project Hope continued to thrive. The Johnson sisters, who had become symbols of strength and resilience, grew stronger in their roles, advancing the foundation's goals and supporting people in need. They worked tirelessly, but behind their successes and accomplishments were personal trials that no one knew about. One day, the foundation's office rang. A name flashed on the phone screen that sent shivers down Lauren's spine. It was Gregory Stewart. Despite his past aggressive actions, they had decided they would never do business with him again. However, his persistence forced Lauren to answer. "Lauren Johnson," Gregory said, "I know you remember me. I have information that could affect the future of your project." Lauren responded warily, "Gregory, what do you need? We are not interested in your offer." "This is not an offer," he replied. "It is a warning. I have found something that could affect the foundation's reputation. You should meet me if you want to know more." Lauren decided to meet him. Although it was difficult, Gregory suggested meeting in a neutral place, an old cafe where they had discussed business many times before. When Lauren arrived for the meeting, Gregory was already there, sitting at a table in the corner. His face was serious, and he wasted no time on foreplay. "This is what I found out," he said, placing a folder of documents on the table. "This is not just ordinary information. I have learned that some of your employees have connections to criminal organizations." Lauren had to restrain herself from expressing her shock and anger. "This is absurd," she said. "Why are you telling us this?" "I understand your distrust," Gregory continued, "but I have done my own investigation. If this is true, it could destroy the reputation of your foundation and jeopardize your entire work." Lauren didn't know whether to believe him, but the documents he showed her were compelling. She decided to do her own research to find out what was really going on. When Lauren returned to the office and told her sisters about the meeting, they were concerned. At first, they tried to ignore Gregory's warnings, but soon they began to notice strange things. Sometime later, there were discrepancies in their accounting, and several employees began to act strangely. Lauren began reviewing all of the foundation's financial and organizational records. It was a complex task that required a great deal of attention to detail. She discovered that some of the employees had hidden ties to organizations that might have a shady past, but the strangest thing was that none of these employees were involved in financial fraud or other illegal activities that could jeopardize the foundation's work. Meanwhile, Gregory continued to increase the pressure, trying to get certain conditions from them. He began threatening to publish scandalous information, which only added to the tension. One day, while Lauren and her sisters were holding an important meeting, they received a message. One of the employees had been arrested on suspicion of having links to criminal gangs. It was a big blow, and their fears began to come true. They immediately began their own investigation to find out what had happened. It turned out that the man who had been arrested had only recently joined the team and had his own plans to destroy the foundation from within, possibly in collaboration with Gregory. Following this revelation, the sisters were faced with the need to react quickly to maintain public trust and ensure that their project would not be harmed. They held a press conference to speak openly about what had happened, emphasizing that they had taken steps to correct the situation and prevent future threats. And then came the unexpected twist. Further investigation revealed that Gregory Stewart was not just a competitor, but a key player in an attempt to manipulate the fund for his own personal gain. His company had hidden interests in illegal activity, and he used his power to cover up his own machinations while blaming others. Lauren and her sisters began gathering evidence against Gregory. Their investigation was not easy, but they eventually uncovered a wealth of evidence of his misconduct. With their case compelling, they approached law enforcement and the media, which led to the opening of a criminal case against Gregory. As the case became widely known, the public supported Project Hope and expressed gratitude for the sisters' ability to overcome the crisis and reveal the truth. The financial and organizational problems began to disappear, and the foundation regained the support and trust of the public. The sisters, despite all the trials, came out of the situation even stronger. They realized that trust and honesty are what really matter, and their tenacity and determination helped them overcome the most difficult trials. Project Hope not only continued, but became even more successful. The sisters continued to work, inspired by their father's legacy and the lessons they learned from that difficult experience. John, though gone, left them not only a physical legacy, but also strong moral values that became the foundation of their success. Each daughter knew that hardships and trials were part of the journey, but their ability to endure and overcome them was their greatest accomplishment. And in each accomplishment and each life changed, they continued to feel the presence of the Father who had taught them that true strength lies in perseverance, integrity, and dedication to one's goals. Project Hope had regained its footing and continued to make a significant impact on society. However, despite their success and recognition, the Johnson sisters could not shake off a sense of unease. Each new achievement brought joy, but also raised questions about how sustainable their success was and whether new threats would arise. One day, Lauren noticed that her phone was ringing with a strange, unknown number. When she answered, there was a voice on the other end that she recognized. It was the voice of an old friend of her father's who worked in law enforcement. "Lauren, it's me, Michael. I need to talk to you. I found something that could affect your entire job." Lauren felt her heart beat faster. She had arranged to meet Michael at a neutral location, a small cafe they both liked. At the meeting, Michael looked serious and worried. "I was checking some old files about your father," he began, "and I came across something strange. It turns out that your father not only had a plan to create a foundation, but also something that was hidden from you." Lauren could hardly hide her concern. "What exactly?" Michael gave her several documents he had found in old archives. The documents contained records of meetings and transactions that were not related to the foundation, but were related to large financial transactions and secret agreements. "These records show that your father was involved in more than just setting up the foundation," Michael continued. "There were transactions that could look like corruption or fraud. I'm not saying your father was involved, but it does raise questions." Lauren was stunned. Her father was a man who had always stood for honesty and kindness to her. Seeing his name associated with such suspicions was extremely difficult. "We need to get to the bottom of this," she said. "If there's anything that could call his reputation or the work of the foundation into question, we need to find out the truth." The sisters met again to discuss the new information. They were disappointed, but also determined to find out the truth. They decided to conduct their own investigation to understand what was going on. They began to look for more information and interview their father's old acquaintances. Gradually, they learned that their father did have connections to some people who could be involved in controversial cases. However, it turned out that most of these cases were about trying to protect the foundation and help people in unstable conditions. The process of uncovering the truth was excruciating. Lauren, Maria, Jenny and Kelly spent days and nights poring over documents, reviewing deals and trying to understand the motives of each participant. It was a difficult period, when their faith in their father's legacy was tested. One day, when they were reviewing another document, they discovered that many of the deals and agreements were related to protecting the fund from major threats it faced early in its operation. It turned out that some of the deals were made to ensure the safety and stability of the fund, which was not always obvious to outsiders. The sisters understood that their father used various methods to protect the project, sometimes operating in a gray area to preserve funds and resources. These actions could be misunderstood, but their father's goal was always the same: to protect the fund and help people. When they had completed their investigation, they decided to reveal the whole truth to the public. They prepared a detailed report that explained all of their father's actions, demonstrating that despite the difficult and controversial moments, his main purpose remained pure and undefiled. The report was widely published, and the public, seeing the whole picture, responded with understanding. They ultimately saw that many of their father's actions were aimed at protecting the project and helping people, despite the difficulties and compromises. After the report was published, the foundation once again became a symbol of transparency and honesty. The sisters were able to clear their father's name and strengthen their own. They continued their work with even greater determination and confidence, knowing that the truth about their father's legacy had been restored. But the events did not end there. Soon after the truth was revealed, they received another, unexpected message. It was a note asking for a meeting from an unknown person who claimed to have important information related to their father and the future of the foundation. Lauren and her sisters were once again faced with the unknown. They couldn't ignore the possibility that there was something they didn't know. At first they felt anxious, but soon realized that this could be a chance to bring closure and get definitive answers. The meeting was set up in an old building that had once belonged to their father. This time, the meeting was full of unexpected revelations. Before them stood a man in the shadows who revealed that another aspect of their father's legacy was connected to a global network of aid and protection that they were unaware of. He said their father had left behind an important piece of work, involving international projects that could make a significant difference in aid and human rights. It was the final piece of their father's grand plan that required their intervention. The sisters knew their task was not yet complete. A new path was opening before them, one that would require their efforts and dedication to see their father's work through to completion. But they were ready to take on the challenge, knowing that each trial and each discovery would only strengthen their bond and their desire to make the world a better place. And so, with new knowledge and determination, they continued their work, knowing that their father had left them not only a legacy, but also the key to something greater than they could have ever imagined. Their journey was far from over, but they were now confident that they could handle any challenges that came their way. The next chapter in the Johnson sisters' lives began with a new mystery and challenge. Their father had left them not only a foundation and its mission, but also a global network of international aid and advocacy they had never imagined. This discovery led them to realize that their work was far from done, and that pursuing his dreams would require new efforts and strategies. After meeting a mysterious informant, the sisters began researching international projects related to their father's legacy. They soon discovered that their father had created a complex network of organizations and initiatives spanning several countries, each focused on human rights, education, and health. He had carefully hidden this information to protect it from those who might use it for their own gain. The first step was to build bridges with international partners and check the networks. They organized meetings with key players and partners with whom their father collaborated. These meetings soon revealed that their father's work was not only charitable, but also strategically important to the global movement to protect human rights and help those in need. However, as they got deeper into their work, they began to encounter new challenges. One day, while Lauren was reviewing documents related to international projects, she noticed warning signs. Some of their key contacts and partners had suddenly disappeared from the network or were no longer accessible. Suddenly, they were faced with a threat they couldn't ignore. During one of her visits abroad, Maria encountered a situation that only increased their concerns. She discovered that one of the foundation's partners was involved in corruption schemes, which threatened the entire project. This information could not only destroy their international connections, but also undermine the foundation's reputation. The sisters knew they had to move carefully and quickly. They began working to expose and eliminate these threats, but they also knew they needed help from those who knew the pitfalls of global philanthropy and international law. Enlisting the help of a former law enforcement officer who was a friend of their father, they began coordinating with international organizations and human rights groups. This network of assistance proved key in uncovering the hidden corruption schemes and in conducting an investigation that led to several major revelations. The situation was complex and dangerous. Suddenly they were receiving threats from unknown persons who were clearly interested in preventing them from revealing the truth. The sisters were convinced that their work concerned something much bigger than just global projects. At this time, they began to realize that their father may have been involved in international schemes that were more dangerous than they could have imagined. Seeing their efforts lead to significant success in fighting corruption and protecting rights, they decided to do everything possible to finish the job. They also sought support from various human rights organizations and government agencies to strengthen their position and ensure protection. Then one day, in the midst of their work, they received an unexpected phone call. On the other end of the line was a man who introduced himself as an international intelligence agent. He informed them that their father not only created international projects, but was also building a secret network designed to protect global human rights initiatives from threats from mafia groups and states interested in suppressing human rights. The agent said that in the last years of his father's work, his activities attracted the attention of not only charities, but also those interested in stopping his activities. This information explained why their father had abandoned such complex and secure systems and why he often operated in the shadows. As the mystery unfolded, they learned that their father had a team that worked in the most dangerous and difficult conditions to provide global aid and protection. This team operated undercover, ensuring the safety of the projects and preventing attempts by malicious people to interfere. The sisters understood that their role was now not only to continue their father's work, but also to protect his legacy from potential threats. They began working closely with international intelligence services and human rights organizations to strengthen their network and protect their projects from possible attacks. But their fight was not over. They were faced with a major international operation that was aimed at destroying their work and undermining the global human rights movement. They had to act quickly, joining forces with allies, to prevent disaster and continue their father's work. Ultimately, after many challenges and trials, the Johnson sisters were able to successfully defend their projects and strengthen their position. Their work attracted the attention of world leaders and human rights organizations, who recognized their contribution to the protection of human rights and international security. Project Hope not only survived, but also expanded significantly, continuing to help those in need. The sisters found new meaning in their work, knowing that their father left them not only a legacy, but a real mission that required courage and dedication. And though their journey was full of challenges, they became symbols of strength and determination. In every success and achievement, they felt their father's presence and wisdom. His legacy lived on, inspiring them and guiding their actions to make the world a better place. Every day of their work was dedicated not only to preserving the legacy, but to building a better future, which was their father's greatest legacy. And with each new step, they knew they were making the world a better place, preserving a dream that once began in the shadows but now lights the way for future generations. After successfully completing a complex operation to protect the foundation and eliminate international threats, the Johnson sisters returned to their main work. However, a constant sense of urgency to remain on guard did not leave them. They understood that as their project grew and the foundation strengthened its position, new challenges and risks would inevitably arise. The new phase of the foundation's work involved expanding its activities into new regions. The sisters decided to focus on providing assistance in crisis zones in countries where human rights were particularly vulnerable. It was an ambitious plan that required the creation of new partnerships and strategies. One morning, during a meeting at the Foundation's office, Lauren received an email from an unknown sender with the subject line, "Father's Secret." The email contained a link to an encrypted document and a short message, "Time to reveal the final legacy." Lauren and her sisters were wary. The document could contain vital information about another aspect of their father's work, or it could be another way to frame them. They decided to proceed with caution and conducted a thorough investigation to ensure the discovery was safe. When they came across the document, they discovered that it was an encrypted file with confusing coordinates and directions. After cracking the code, they were given coordinates that pointed to a remote location in Eastern Europe. The sisters decided to check these coordinates and went to the designated place. It was a small village in the mountains, where they found an old abandoned building. Inside the building, they found a secret archive that contained even deeper secrets. The archive turned out to be filled with documents, photographs, and notes about international connections their father had been involved in. One of the documents mentioned an organization that was engaged in harboring activists and victims of political repression. The documents also contained information that this organization was under threat from a powerful criminal group. At the same time, strange events began to occur in the Foundation's office. Some key employees began to disappear, and the data in the system became unstable. The sisters realized that someone was trying to undermine their work from within. This coincided with receiving threats from unknown sources. During their investigation, they discovered that the criminal group their father had fought against was now attempting to destroy the Foundation's work and hide evidence of its activities. Their actions were aimed at infiltrating the organization, causing discord, and discrediting the Foundation. Lauren, Maria, Jenny, and Kelly knew they needed to act quickly. They began organizing their defenses and building relationships with allies who could help them combat the gang. They also began working with intelligence agencies and law enforcement to identify and neutralize threats. At the same time, they received information that one of their employees was actually a spy for a criminal group. This person was assigned to sabotage the Foundation from within. The revelation of his actions became a critical moment that allowed the sisters to clean up their team and strengthen it. Shortly after, the sisters launched a special operation to uncover the criminal group and rescue the people who were under threat. They also published a detailed report of their actions and the threats they received to demonstrate to the public and partners that they continue to operate in complete transparency. The Hope Project continued its work, expanding its influence and strengthening its position in the international arena. The sisters, despite all the difficulties, not only preserved the legacy of their father, but also managed to strengthen his influence in the international arena. They also became symbols of the struggle for human rights and the protection of vulnerable groups. Each new achievement brought joy, but also reminded us how important it is to remain vigilant and committed to our goals. Their work became an example for other organizations and an inspiration for people who strive to make the world a better place. But there was always the shadow of new challenges on the horizon. The sisters knew that their work would never end, and that each new effort required not only strength but also wisdom. They continued to fight for truth and justice, knowing that every day of their work brought them closer to the ideal that had once been their father's dream. Their journey was full of struggle and hardship, but they became part of something bigger than just a legacy. They built a future based on the principles and values their father left them, and worked for the good of the world, continuing to inspire others with their example. The Johnson sisters understood that despite all the difficulties and dangers, they found the strength to continue, knowing that their mission had a deep meaning. They left their mark on history as fighters for justice and advocates for those in need, and every step of their journey was dedicated to the memory of their father and his great ideas, which now lived in their actions and achievements. After months of struggle and difficult trials, the Johnson sisters were finally able to see the fruits of their efforts. They had overcome international threats, exposed corruption, and protected their foundation from devastating attacks. These victories were not only a testament to their dedication, but also an important step toward a better world. With the return of calm and stabilization, Project Hope resumed its work with renewed energy and determination. The sisters continued to expand their programs, especially in crisis zones and regions in need of assistance. They established new partnerships with international organizations and human rights groups that helped strengthen their efforts. One of the most significant achievements was the successful holding of a major international conference on human rights, organized by the Foundation. At this conference, representatives of different countries and organizations discussed important issues of human rights protection and assistance to those in need. The Johnson sisters became key participants, presenting their experience and achievements. The conference became a landmark event, emphasizing the importance and effectiveness of their work. The sisters also launched several new programs aimed at educating and supporting youth in difficult regions. They created scholarships for students from low-income families, supported programs to train women in entrepreneurship, and developed initiatives to strengthen legal protections for vulnerable groups. Over time, recognition of their work became global. Project Hope Foundation received numerous awards and recognitions for their achievements in human rights and philanthropy. These awards were not only a reflection of their success, but also a confirmation that hard work and dedication can change people's lives for the better. The Johnson sisters, despite all the difficulties, found time for personal life and family joys. They began to celebrate their successes not only on a professional level, but also in their personal lives. Each of them found their moments of happiness, building strong relationships and finding satisfaction in their personal achievements. Family gatherings and holidays became a regular part of their lives. They came together to celebrate important milestones, share joy, and support each other. These moments became valuable reminders that despite all the challenges, family remains a pillar of strength. The foundation also established a tradition of an annual Day of Hope festival, where participants, volunteers and partners gathered to celebrate successes and share stories of those who had been helped by their initiatives. The festival became a symbol of unity and hope, attracting public attention and supporting the spirit of philanthropy. Ultimately, the Johnson sisters were able to fulfill and even surpass the mission their father left them. They built an organization that continued to grow and evolve, helping thousands of people around the world. Their work became an example of how to combine effort, integrity, and resilience to change the world for the better. Their father, although not physically with them, left a powerful legacy that lived on through their actions and accomplishments. The sisters felt that they had done everything they could to preserve and build on his dream. They found comfort and pride in the fact that his legacy was not only a monument to his life, but a living source of inspiration and change. Each day they continued their work with gratitude and satisfaction, knowing that their efforts were making a real difference in creating positive change in the world. They were grateful for all the lessons they had learned and for the opportunity to continue working for the benefit of humanity. And that was the happy ending to their story, the knowledge that their hard work and dedication had paid off. that they had overcome all the difficulties and left a significant mark on history. Their path had been full of struggle and overcoming difficulties, but it had ultimately led to a bright future filled with hope, success and joy. We want to hear your thoughts on what you just watched. What did you think of the story of the Johnson sisters and their amazing journey? Which moments touched or surprised you the most? What did you think of the heroines' challenges and achievements? Your opinion is important to us and we value every opinion and feedback. Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts and feelings. We would love to know how this story affected you. Don't forget that your support and participation help us create even more interesting and inspiring materials. You are part of our history, and your opinion matters. Thank you for your time and attention. Stay tuned for more exciting and touching stories.